Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a program that talks about breeding of terrorism and its impact on South Asian nations. Let's begin with the headlines first. Indian security forces thwart terrorist attacks in Jammu and Kashmir. Terrorist groups in Pak resurfacing under new banners. And Taliban victory likely to embolden jihadist groups in Kashmir. Let's begin with India's Jammu and Kashmir, where peace remains disrupted due to consistent Pakistan-aided terror activities. However, India remains committed to fighting all its tricks to stop its western neighbour from inciting terror in the valley. Indian security forces have been successful in busting all the nefarious anti-India plots hatched in the corridors of Islamabad and Rawalpindi. We have this report. The peace and development in Jammu and Kashmir frustrates Pakistan, and it makes all possible efforts to unleash chaos and violence in the region. However, the Indian security forces are carrying out a series of operations to uproot the network of Pak-backed terrorism from Jammu and Kashmir. In the latest operation, a Jaish-e-Mohammad terrorist was killed in an encounter in a Kulgam district. However, a policeman was also killed and 5 people, including 3 soldiers, were also injured in an encounter. The encounter started after security forces launched a joint operation at Pariwan area of Kulgam district following information about the presence of militants there. The search operation turned into an encounter after militants opened fire at security forces.
हमारी जो कोशिश रहती है कि सिविलियन जो हैं उनको बचाया जाए। इस ऑपरेशन के दौरान भी 2 सिविलियन जो जख्मी हुए, जिनको मिलिटेंट ढाल बना करके वहां से निकलना चाहता था, मगर हमारे बहादुर जवानों ने उसकी जो चाल कामयाब नहीं होने दी। जो 2 सिविलियन जख्मी हुए थे वो भी ठीक हैं, 3 आर्मी के जवान भी स्टेबल हैं। अनफॉर्चुनेटली हमारे एक जवान की शहादत हुई। सिविलियन को ढाल बना करके उनको आगे लेकर के गोली चलाना, फोर्सेस के साथ आकर के भिड़ना, इसमें लोगों का नुकसान करना और फिर उसको सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस के नाम पे चढ़ाना, ये एक नई साजिश पाकिस्तान की एजेंसियों की है।
Jammu and Kashmir has witnessed a rapid development after the abrogation of Article 370. There has been a decline in terror-related incidents and cross-border infiltration since then. However, in the past few days, many terrorists backed by Pakistan are trying to infiltrate in the Kashmir Valley to disrupt communal harmony in the region. Particularly, terror groups such as Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammad have been the Pakistani establishment's preferred tools towards fighting India in Kashmir. Just few days back, J&K killed 3 militants of Jaish-e-Mohammad in Pulwama district and also gunned down a top commander of Lashkar-e-Taiba outfit, Salim Parey, during an encounter in Srinagar. Police officials said that he was involved in dozen killings of civilians.
All the top commanders in Kashmir Valley as of today are nearly killed, and there are only a few of them, I would say not even a handful, are left around, and those they are also trying to protect themselves and save themselves by trying to hide somewhere, because they also are not now that active as they were before. Therefore, the killing of top commanders does make a difference into the entire operational of these terrorism over there in Kashmir Valley, and the security forces are doing the right thing by getting after them. And along with that, I would say that the people of Kashmir Valley, they are the ones who are providing the necessary inputs to the security forces, to Jammu and Kashmir police, to go after these terrorists and militants whenever they take a hiding place anywhere.
While Jammu and Kashmir is trying to return back to normalcy, Pakistan intensifies its efforts to create havoc in the region. However, the Indian security forces are fully committed to bring peace in the Kashmir Valley. Recently, there have been many operations across Jammu and Kashmir in which several militants have been killed. Many of them were foreign nationals.
What is required now by the security forces is to go after the overground and underground workers and counter the propaganda that is being fostered by Pakistan on the social media and in the diplomatic forums. Because till the time India does not counter this at its levels, at the government levels, it is going to be very difficult for the security forces in Kashmir Valley to counter and also to stop the brainwashing of innocent people over there.
Pakistan has always sought with varying degrees of intensity to destabilize India, wreck its unity and challenge its integrity. This approach is unlikely to change. But Indian security forces are always vigilant, alert and capable of giving a befitting reply. Counter-terror watchdog Financial Action Task Force has time and again criticized Pakistan's inaction against proscribed terror outfits that continue to function under different names. In the past 2 decades, several groups accused of carrying out terror attacks have avoided a crackdown by changing their names. The resurfacing of terror factions over the years has led regional experts to question the government's willingness to hold such outfits accountable. We take a look.
A video in the public domain shows a Pakistani police officer praising Jaish-e-Mohammad for rescue efforts in Murree after 22 Pakistanis were found frozen to death in their vehicles, which had been struck due to heavy snowfall in the area. Another video shows several people sitting in a vehicle thanking Hafiz Saeed for helping them, with a man saying some social activists affiliated with Hafiz Saeed came and provided them with food. These videos are being shared multiple times by pro-LET social accounts. With the Murree tragedy, the group is active again and is using this incident to gain sympathy and subsequently recruits, which puts a serious question over Pakistani government's claims that it is containing such terror groups. Banned organizations are not allowed to resume activities after changing names, but in Pakistan, it is very much possible. In the past 2 decades, several groups accused of carrying out terror attacks have avoided a crackdown by changing their names. The resurfacing of several terror factions over the years has led regional experts to question the government's willingness to hold such groups accountable.
There are hundreds of terrorist groups in Pakistan, some of whom are very well known and have been indulging in umpteen number of attacks against India, especially Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammad, Jaish-e-Mohammad, and there are so many of them. And what they do is, whenever they come under pressure, whether from the FATF or from other international organizations, with the connivance of Pakistani intelligence agencies, the military, and the deep state, so to say, or sometimes with the connivance of the government itself, they are able to mutate themselves. They rename into a new group, and then they start recruiting people, they start arranging funding, they indulge in terror activities.
Terrorist groups in Pakistan organize special campaigns during natural disasters and festivals. These outfits then collect donations from people and then pass on the money to finance terrorism in Kashmir through their overground workers. For example, Falai Insaniyat Foundation, a charity run by terror outfit Lashkar-e-Taiba, has been supporting terrorists and funding terrorism in the valley. Another one, Al Rahmat Trust in Pakistan, distributes pamphlets to raise funds for sacrificing animals during Eid, and after collecting the money, it finances terrorism. These organizations also run profit-generating business like operating schools, where fee is exceptionally high in the context of South Asia, targeting upper middle class. They have an entire network of people who work for their agenda of fomenting terror in Kashmir. Investigations have proven that these terrorist organizations find vulnerable families who are in need of aid, and by providing them help, they ask for youngsters in such families to be sent to serve their organizations.
Terrorist groups actually find their recruits from the poor people, the disadvantaged, those who have no hope left. They are the ones who are unemployed youth. And then, in the name of religion, they exploit it, they recruit them. So this is also one of the major problems that only the states can resolve in concert with the religious leaders. But Pakistan will not do so because it helps them. At the end of the day, there is a nexus. So they may not want it to happen in their own country, but when you use it as a policy in the other country, you continue to support these kind of organizations and activities, and eventually they come and hit you back.
Terrorist groups in Pakistan have heavily misused charity organizations as front organizations by naming their program areas around humanitarian and relief services. Pakistan has the capacity to stop these groups from changing names and operating freely, but it simply doesn't have the desire to do so. The government is willfully ignoring the problem because authorities believe the groups somehow promote the government's interests in the region. While the problem is not new, it may be worsening as many of these radical groups are trying to rebrand themselves to enter national politics.
Moving on, it's been 71 years since Pakistan, through illegal and immoral means of trickery and thuggery, occupied the present-day territory of POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. Ever since, it has been using these regions to propagate extremism and terrorism. Despite several warnings from the international community, terror launch pads are operating in full swing in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, where terrorists are receiving training on cross-border terrorism and infiltration by the Pakistan Army, a report. Pakistan-occupied Kashmir continues to be the safe haven for terrorists and extremists operating in the country. The land over which the people of POK have their prerogative is brazenly being used to establish and proliferate terror camps. Not one or two, but a large number of terrorist camps thrive here. The gullible youth is indoctrinated in these camps only and then asked to infiltrate and unleash mayhem in neighboring countries, especially India. At one side, amid international pressure, Pakistan government pretends to launch a crackdown on these terror groups. On the other, terror leaders in Pakistan continue to carry rallies and hold meetings openly. Recently, addressing a press conference, Indian Army Chief said that the concentration of some 350 to 400 terrorists in terror launch pads and training facilities on the other side of the line of control and repeated infiltration attempts expose the nefarious intents of the adversary.
There is an increase in concentration of terrorists in various launch pads, and there have been repeated attempts at infiltration across the LC. And needless to say, this once again exposes the nefarious designs of our Western neighbor. But we on our part have resolved to show zero tolerance for terror, and we have committed ourselves to extract dire costs should that be forced upon us.
After being cornered by international community for its increasingly active role in terrorism, Pakistan has made bold claims of cracking down at terror facilities. However, Kashmiri voices across the globe have refuted the Pakistani claims of fighting terrorism as a bogus exercise and say that all the camps are intact and in fact are being provided with constant reinforcement to keep the agenda thriving. India's hostile neighbour is desperate to unleash bloodbath in hinterland of India and Jammu and Kashmir, for which it is also using drones along the Indian borders to facilitate intrusion. few months ago, a video in public domain had shown terrorists reaching the tracing camps in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir after Taliban takeover. These terrorists were shown taking out victory rallies openly. They were sent to fight along with the Taliban on the instructions of the ISI and Pakistan Army. They came back home with a renewed focus on Kashmir.
General Naravane, again recently during his press briefing, has said that there are 350 to 400 terrorists who are waiting on various launch pads today in the opposite state of J&K. So therefore, we need to be careful. While the actions up till now have been good and we have eliminated a large number of terrorists, but the threat of terrorism will continue for a sufficiently long time. So we therefore need to be prepared for a good quality counter-infiltration grid on the LOC, and anybody who manages to escape from the counter-infiltration grid, we have to kill him inside the Kashmir Valley by carrying out intelligence-based counter-terrorist operations.
As per the intelligence input, the arms that have fallen into the Taliban's hands are also being diverted to Jaish-e-Mohammad and Lashkar-e-Taiba. It is almost likely that the Pakistan Army terrorist groups will try to smuggle these American weapons into India to create unrest in Kashmir. The world is now watching what is happening in POK. Pak-sponsored terrorism has crossed all limits. Hence, the international community urgently needs to take certain concrete diplomatic steps against Pakistan. Since the return to power of the Taliban in Afghanistan, the world's attention has shifted to other global developments, including the challenges being posed by the long COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, for India, the events in Afghanistan continue to demand great attention. There is concern that Afghanistan will provide a regional hub for militants who may carry out jihad on Indian soil. A report.
The conflict landscape of Afghanistan is diverse and multifaceted. It is characterized by rivalries between jihadist groups and competition for recruits. The impacts of such friction go beyond the borders of the war-torn country. That entire geography from the Afghanistan border stretching up to the border of Kashmir is now susceptible to jihadist groups. A Taliban-controlled Afghanistan is posing the threat of exacerbating the volatile situation in Kashmir. Kashmir has a long history of insurgency with roots in Afghanistan in the late 1980s. It was during the USSR-Afghanistan Mujahideen conflict that the insurgency in the valley began. At that time, fighters from Afghanistan, along with the Pakistani army, had trained Kashmiri insurgents. When the Taliban took control in the early 1990s, they provided safe havens to Kashmiris who needed to recompose before returning to the insurgents' ranks. Experts do believe that a redux of the Taliban controlling territory and providing shelter to terrorist groups could cause a flare-up of tensions in Kashmir.
You're concerned that defense experts in India are worried that Taliban can allow use of Afghan territory for militants in Kashmir. I think we need to think beyond that. We should not think in defensive terms. We have to destroy entire ecosystem of Islamic radicalism and terrorism, and that is possible if we crush organized crime in this region like drug trafficking, fake currency, and Pakistani deep state has emerged the biggest patron of these things. So I think we need to have a larger strategic picture rather than having this defensive approach.
Another concern for New Delhi is the presence of anti-India groups based in Pakistan that could gain legitimacy from the Taliban's strength and train their focus on India. According to media and intelligence reports, Taliban fighters over the years have been directed by the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence Agency to attack Indian infrastructure in Afghanistan. More worrying reports have highlighted that thousands of fighters from Pakistani groups that are active in Kashmir, such as the LAT and JEM, have fought alongside the Taliban. Another concern for India is the presence of transnational terrorist groups such as the Islamic State in the Khorasan province and the Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. For instance, Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent has already hailed the US withdrawal from Afghanistan as a victory. In early 2021, they changed the name of their magazine from Nawai Afghanistan Jihad, that is Voice of the Afghan Jihad, to Nawai Ghazwatul Hind, which means Voice of the Conquest of India.
If any country which is most vulnerable to Islamic radicalism and Islamic terrorism, it is India. We have been second most impacted country by terrorism for a long time since the turn of this century. But right now, what has happened that America has withdrawn. And all these groups, the very fact that they are stationed here, they are located here, and Pakistani military state or Pakistani deep state is patronizing them. And unfortunately, this Turkey has come up as yet another collaborator of this Pakistani design. So this is extremely worrying. Let me also tell you that, virtually a good number of states who otherwise profess, their commitment to fight terrorism, even those states, those countries have been using terror organizations for their strategic goals.
It is already clear that the Taliban has not gone beyond paying lip service to ousting the Al-Qaeda, and there is concern that the latter will only grow in strength in the coming days. Scrutiny should be heightened until the shock of the Taliban victory subsides and Afghanistan becomes less of an interesting point for jihadist groups. Various lessons need to be picked up from India's own counter-terrorism practices as well as international experiences. This would be paramount if India aims to prevent the first and second order effects of foreign fighters coming from Afghanistan.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Skyrim Zamik signing off on behalf of an entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.